watching CBS News continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
The potential for a significant change in the Persian Gulf War has arisen over the last hour. 6 Iraqi Scud missiles have hit Israel. 3 in and around the Tel Aviv area. There are some casualties, at least in the southern suburb of Tel Aviv called Holon. 3 missiles in and around Tel Aviv have hit there. 2 have hit in the Haifa area. 1 has hit in the smaller area called Spak in the north of Israel, told. Tom Fenton is our man on the scene. Tom, are you there on the telephone? Perhaps not yet. Let's go to David Martin at the Defense Department. David, what do you know? This story is breaking around us at the moment. We have had, for those of you who perhaps were in part of our local station cutaway or weren't with us during our coverage during the previous hour, Tom Fenton in Tel Aviv broke this story. He heard air raid sirens, quickly put on his gas mask. He heard one explosion. We had him on the air at that point. We did not know what the situation was. We now do know that at least 6 Scud missiles have hit Israel, 3 around Tel Aviv, 2 at Haifa, 2 at Spak. Let's try again to get Tom Fenton up on the telephone. Tom, are you there?
Dan, I'm here. I'm getting reports that there are fires to the south of Tel Aviv. I presume that's in the Holon area. There are helicopters flying around there. There are a number of jets in the airs, and somebody suggested that maybe 1 or 2 of the booms that I heard were sonic booms. That's a possibility. But to recap, as you did, we have 6 known Scud attacks. We're still being told not to go down into the cellars and bomb shelters, which you would do if they were conventional warheads. We're being told to stay in the sealed-up rooms, so the assumption is still that they're chemical attacks, and until they're sure they're not, we'll remain in the Tel Aviv Bureau.
This occurred just a short while ago against a backdrop of continuing relentless U.S. and Allied airplane strikes and also cruise missile strikes against Iraq and Iraqi forces in Kuwait. But ominously, as it turned out this afternoon in Belgium, the Iraqi ambassador to Belgium said, and I quote, "The attack on Israel is coming. The decision has been taken. The timing is, of course, a secret." And then the Iraqi ambassador to Belgium said, quote, "The war has only just started. It will be a very long war." That's unquote from him. Now, there were air raid sirens in Saudi Arabia a short while ago. We're going to get Bob Simon back up to talk about. Bob, do you know anything more about those air raid sirens around the Dhahran area?
Dan, there's still an alert in this area. It is no longer a gas alert, but the air raid drill is still in effect. Most of the people in this hotel are down in the air raid shelter. We have heard no activity of any kind since the siren sounded. No warplanes have taken off. There's very little traffic on the road. This time, the source of the air raid alert came from the American air base just next door to this hotel. Last night there were several sirens, and that turned out to be locally generated, people who got a little bit panicky when they knew that the war had begun. We know nothing further about what's happening here now, Dan. Yes.
Bob, the Jordanian ambassador to the United States, in an interview from Washington a short while ago, said that these Scud missile attacks on Israel, we know that at least 6 of the Scuds have hit in Israel. Tom Fenton says that the working belief at the moment, not knowledge, but working belief at the moment is that the Scuds, at least some of them, did have chemical weapons as warheads. We know there's some casualties, at least in the Holon section south of Tel Aviv. Now, the Jordanian ambassador was talking about the potential here for a chain reaction that could change the whole dimension of the war. Could you quickly put that in perspective for us?
Dan, there are 2 ways that Israeli warplanes could get to these sites in Iraq. They could either fly over Jordan, in which case they just might have to take out the Jordanian Air Force on the way. It does not look like King Hussein is in any position to offer the Israelis the kind of ironclad guarantees that the Israelis would need, that he would not interfere. The only other way they can do it is through Saudi Arabia, heading south. And for this they would need both American and Saudi clearance, which at this point in the war might be very difficult to get.
Bob, we'll be checking back with you about what, if any, significance to attach to those sirens and the alert in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. We're staying in touch with Tom Fenton in Israel and David Martin at the Defense Department about this development of 6 Iraqi Scud missiles confirmed now hitting Israel, 3 around Tel Aviv, 2 in the Haifa area, 1 in the area known as Spak. In our Washington studio now, Senator Sam Nunn, a Democrat of Georgia. Senator Nunn, give us some context on this story, which is breaking around us at the moment.
Dan, of course it's a serious development. It's what we hope to avoid. I would say, though, that it's probably better odds tonight that Israel is going to be restrained than last night. This is one time I hope they'll let us do the retaliating for them. They know now that we have hit Iraq very hard. They know our capabilities. We've had very good coordination with them. The relationship is excellent. So I am hopeful they'll let us do the responding and we will not see the war spread.
Senator Nunn, trying to fish out the quotation as we cover this breaking story, but earlier today, the Bush administration, if not the president himself, made it, I thought, rather explicitly clear in a warning to Saddam Hussein that he had better not use any chemical weapons anywhere. Now, while emphasizing we do not know whether these Scud missiles that hit Israel carried chemical weapons, what do you make of that threat to Saddam Hussein now that the Scuds have actually hit Israel?
Well, I think the president was dead serious, and I think he has every right to be, and I believe this would require a much stronger retaliation than even they've experienced yet. So far, we've been very, very particular about military targets. Our people have done, I think, an unbelievable job of avoiding collateral damage, but there are a lot of other targets. If you're willing to risk collateral damage and risk damage and death to civilians, could be hit. So there are ways we have to escalate. I'm hoping the chemicals were not used. I hope that first for the benefit of those in Israel, and second from the benefit of not seeing this war spread out.
Senator Nunn, you probably know more about the weaponry than possibly anybody else in the United States Senate. What are the ways the Iraqis could have fired Scuds and had them hit Israel after the avalanche of steel and fire that air power has been pouring down on the Iraqis, with a particular concentration on Scud missile sites?
Dan, we believe we knocked out the fixed site Scud missiles. Those are the locations where their more accurate Scuds are because they're stationary. The mobile Scud missiles can be moved all over the place. They could be hidden in any number of places and we would not know it. We knew that we had not found all of those. Now, those are inaccurate missiles. They're much less accurate than the fixed site, and neither one of them are very accurate. That's the good news from a military point of view. The bad news is when you have inaccurate weapons, usually you go after populations, and that is probably what's happened here.
Now, the Jordanian ambassador to the United States just a short while ago in our broadcast said that the potential is alive and working now in light of these Scud missiles hitting Israel, 6 of them, for a chain reaction that could change the whole dimension of the war. Could you expand on that and tell us what he meant by that?
Well, that's the danger. If Israel retaliates, of course, they may go over Jordanian airspace, and that could start a war between Israel and Jordan. We know that Israel would prevail there, but that could inflame the Arab populations in Jordan and really throughout the area more than they already are inflamed. And that's the spreading out effect that we hope to avoid. I think the chances, even though that is a possibility, the chances of that happening now are not as strong as they would have been last night. If the same thing had occurred last night, Israel would have probably had less confidence in what the United States might do than they do tonight. And also, I would hope that the Jordanians themselves would understand that if Israel does overfly, they're just asking to be destroyed if they prevent that.
Senator Nunn, if you can hang on with us for a moment, I'd appreciate it. But we're going now to WCBS TV reporter Jim Johnson. The veteran anchorman is on the telephone now from Jerusalem. Jim, are you there?
Yes, Dan. Hello.
What do you know? What have you seen? What have you heard?
Well, first we heard the air raid sirens go off. I went on a balcony to wonder why. And then shortly after the sirens went off, I heard sounds of jets. And several jets were screaming over the top of this hotel, headed in the direction of Iraq. And shortly thereafter, Israeli radio, which is government-controlled, said that Israel had retaliated and was in the process of retaliating for the missile attack on the Tel Aviv area.
Jim, I want to make sure I understand. You heard on Israeli radio the Israelis announce that the Israeli Air Force was in the process of retaliating for these Scud missile attacks.
Yes.
That's new information here. How long ago did you hear that, Jim?
That's about 10, 15 minutes ago.
If you can hang on.
And I saw the jets myself headed, Dan, toward Iraq.
Hold on with us, Jim, if you can. Let's go back to Tom Fenton in Tel Aviv. Tom, anything new from your end, and do you know anything about this Israeli retaliation on the way in Iraq?
All I can say is that there have been a number of jets in the air, and they took to the air shortly after the first attack. I remind you also that the Israeli Air Force has been maintaining planes in the air 24 hours a day, as well as planes on the ground with the pilots in the cockpit 24 hours a day. A couple of reports also on the nature of the attack. The first is that
Is none still
there are 10 casualties in one hospital, and we still don't know whether they're victims of a chemical or a classic, if I can call it that, attack, and also that the rescue workers are all in chemical warfare gear, which indicates that they still suspect it's a chemical attack. Dan?
What a scene it is in and around Tel Aviv and possibly in other areas of Israel at this moment. Rescue workers going to the Holon suburb south of Tel Aviv to try to do rescue work. Casualties are reported there after Scud missiles hit. The rescue workers working in their poison gas mask and gas-resistant gear. Always an eerie and frightening sight, to say the least. 6 Scud missiles have hit Israel, 3 around Tel Aviv, in and around Tel Aviv, 2 in the Haifa area, and 1 in the Smock area. And as you heard from Jen Jensen reporting from Jerusalem, Israeli radio, quoted by Jensen, says that the Israelis are in the process of retaliating against the Iraqis. Bob Simon in Saudi Arabia has more on the Scud attack. Bob?
Dan, we've just got word from Saudi officials here that missiles have been launched towards this air base in Dhahran. I emphasize this is from Saudi officials. They say they don't know how many. They don't know if the missiles are chemically equipped. One of the big differences between this area and Israel, of course, is the number of Patriot missiles around here, Patriot missiles which are here precisely for the purpose of shooting down Scuds. The Israelis never trusted the few Patriot missiles that they were given. I talked to Air Force officers just a couple of weeks ago. They didn't trust the Patriots. They didn't really trust the American Air Force to solve their problem for them. But the Israelis apparently decided that they would give the Americans some time. They would give the Americans the chance to take out the missiles. Obviously, that hasn't happened, and now we'll just wait and see.
Bob, events are moving so quickly here. We want to make sure that people understand the difference. 6 Scuds have hit in Israel. Now, Bob Simon, our regular correspondent in Israel, now covering the military campaign in Saudi Arabia, is reporting to us from Dhahran, the big base, the center of American military activity on the east coast of Saudi Arabia, right along the Persian Gulf. And he says that Saudi officials, he emphasized the source was Saudi officials, had said that some Scud missiles had been fired tonight in the direction of Saudi Arabia. We have not confirmed that. The information from Israel, so far as we have it, has been confirmed. There are some casualties south of Tel Aviv in the wake of a Scud missile attack. Not confirmed that the Scud missiles that hit Israel contained chemical weapons, although Tom Fenton says the rescue workers are dressed in their gas mask and their chemical weapons protective gear. And Tom Fenton says that the working belief, not absolute knowledge, but the working belief is that at least some of the Scuds, some of the 6 that hit Israel, some or all, did contain chemical weapons. Now, as regards Saudi Arabia, Bob Simon, with one source among Saudi officials, says that the Saudis say that some Scuds have been fired towards Saudi Arabia. You remember in the very early stages of the war, last night in the first hours, there were reports from Bahrain that the Iraqis had gotten off some Scud missiles in the general direction of the Persian Gulf coast below Kuwait, but that the Scuds had gone off target and had never reached their targets. Right now, Bill Plant is at the State Department. Confirmation of Israeli retaliation there and the implications. Bill?
Dan, there are 2 things I can tell you. The United States was turned down when it asked Israeli officials not to retaliate, to let the U.S. do it. That happened late last week. So it's no surprise that the Israelis are, as we now understand, retaliating for that attack on Israel. Point number 2. Secretary of State Baker came away from the Middle East last week with the understanding that the members of the Arab coalition against Iraq would not bolt if Israel retaliated for an attack on Israel, but that they would have to bolt if Israel took a preemptive strike against Iraq. So we believe that they are retaliating. We know that the U.S. expected it.
As always, things with deep complications in the Middle East as this story continues to develop tonight. Now, the evidence builds that the Israelis are, as we speak, in the process of retaliating against the Iraqis for the at least six Scuds that hit Israel. Whether the Israelis are flying over Jordanian airspace, which would be yet another complication, we do not know. The expectation was, only an expectation, that the Israelis would make an effort not to fly over Jordanian airspace. We'll try to keep you up to date on this story with the most accurate information possible as our CBS News coverage of the changing war in the Gulf continues.
When four slender, no-fat calories taste like butter, it's got to be Molly.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
Same as in Motrin in non-prescription strength.
The same medicine found in the prescription.
Did you ever notice that a lot of pain relievers seem to be saying the same thing? Well, if you want the same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin, wouldn't it just be simpler to ask for Motrin IB? Non-prescription strength Motrin IB. You can't buy a more effective pain reliever without a prescription. Motrin IB. Accept no alternatives.
How much insulation do you have in your attic? 3 inches? 6 inches? Well, the Department of Energy recommends R38 for most American homes, which is equivalent to a foot of Owens Corning pink fiberglass. So grab a ruler and measure your attic insulation. Then get rolling, because 12 inches of pink fiberglass can help you get a foothold on your energy bills.
When you rinse first with Plax, normal everyday brushing takes on a whole new meaning. Plax, clinically proven to remove more plaque than brushing alone.
I won't wear anything without Cross Your Heart, because great looks start with Cross Your Heart. With crisscross shaping, I always look better.
The Cross Your Heart bra. Great looks start with Cross Your Heart from Playtex.
The fit that makes the fashion.
American warplanes hammered Iraq and Iraqi forces in Kuwait again today, and Saddam Hussein fought back as he said he would by lobbing missiles into Israel. As we continue our coverage of the changing Persian Gulf War situation, these are among the headlines. Iraqi missiles strike Israel, 6 Scuds. The Israelis reportedly are in the process of now retaliating. The Allies batter targets in Iraq and Kuwait, including B-52 raids. Indications are the ground war may start sooner as opposed to later. Iraq now says it has downed 60 Allied planes. The Allies say that is not so. The war reaches a new front. Iraq has struck Israel, 6 confirmed hits by Iraqi Scud missiles, 3 in and around Tel Aviv. The other 3 further north, including 2 in Haifa. There are some casualties. Ambulances are reported taking victims to hospitals from the suburbs south of Tel Aviv. Air raid sirens sounded. Israeli citizens were ordered to put on gas masks and move to sealed rooms. Sirens continue to go off in and around Tel Aviv, according to our correspondent on the scene there and the one who broke the story, Tom Fenton. Air raid sirens were also heard in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, the big U.S. military installation there. It's a Saudi installation, but lots of U.S. military there. No indication, though, of any actual attacks in Dhahran. One report, only from Saudi sources, saying that some Scud missiles had been fired in the direction of Dhahran, but no other details and no confirmation. CBS News Defense Department correspondent David Martin tells us there are unconfirmed reports that more U.S. aircraft may have been lost than have been officially reported. The last official report was that 1 U.S. F-18 was shot down with a U.S. pilot killed. The steady pounding of Iraq continues. Hundreds upon hundreds of Allied missions reported, such as this one. These aircraft thundering into the sky and thundering over Iraq and Kuwait all day, all night, and then continuing into the second night. B-52s from now 2 bases, one in Diego Garcia, which is known about, and B-52 striking from yet another base, are said to be carpet bombing targets of the elite Praetorian, in effect, Iraqi Guard, Saddam Hussein's best troops. These, of course, not B-52s. The B-52s are the old stratofortresses, the high-flying, high-altitude bombers, not very precise, but they can deliver a lot of tonnage, and they have been doing so all day. But the war so far has been in the air. This may soon move to a ground war. Allied troops, led by U.S. troops, are massing near the Kuwaiti border. A big move to the west, kind of flanking movement deep in the desert to the west is also reported. U.S. and other Allied troops are poised for a possible invasion of Kuwait. This would involve U.S. Marines and U.S. Army troops. No indication yet when that next phase on the ground might take place. David Martin's at the Pentagon with late information on the Scud missile attacks on Israel. David?
Dan, U.S. sources say it does appear as if Israel is retaliating now against Iraq for these Scud missile attacks. Just earlier we had Jim Jensen from Jerusalem saying that that was being reported on by the government-run Israeli radio. This is independent confirmation from U.S. sources. I should say corroboration. It's not a certain thing, obviously, until the weapons land in Iraq, but there is corroboration from U.S. sources that that report on Israeli radio is correct and that Israel is now in the process of retaliating for this attack, bringing them, obviously, into this war, changing the equation. The question of whether or not Scud missiles have been launched against Saudi Arabia is still, I think, an open question. U.S. officials expect such an attack based on the fact that Hussein has demonstrated the capability to do it against Israel, and he is bound to want to score as many hits as he can while he is still able to cause some damage. Now, these Scud missiles were launched from mobile launchers, as Senator Sam Nunn pointed out earlier. And earlier today, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, talked about his concerns about being able to locate all of those Scud missiles.
David Martin of the Pentagon. Our CBS News coverage of the Scud missile attacks on Israel and Israel's reported retaliation continues. Continuing our coverage of the changing war in the Gulf. With us now, Mike Wallace, 60 Minutes managing editor and editor-correspondent and an authority on the Middle East and Israel, and Fuad Ajami, professor from Johns Hopkins University and our consultant on the Middle East. Mike Wallace.
Israel Radio, Dan. We've just gotten word here. Israel Radio now says that people can take off their gas masks, but should remain indoors. So, if they are not chemically tipped, these Scud missiles, I think perhaps they are politically tipped missiles.
Well, they're aimed right at the alliance.
Exactly right. And the targets, it's interesting to me that none of them so far has been aimed at Jerusalem. Saddam Hussein is not going to take a chance at hitting the Dome on the Rock.
Right.
Saddam Hussein is going to try to go after Tel Aviv. The Defense Ministry is really the only ministry, only government ministry that is in downtown Tel Aviv. So he's going after Haifa in the north. He's going after Tel Aviv. He's staying strictly away from Jerusalem because that can do him no good politically if he were to hit that city.
Some people may not know that the Dome of the Rock is, of course, the Islamic main religious shrine in Jerusalem, where Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have their shrines. Fuad Ajami, put this in some perspective for us. When we say that these missiles were aimed at the heart of the alliance, that means what?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. These were not just military targets. This is really an attempt to divide this coalition. This is really an attempt to basically dramatize to the Arab world that the Arab partners of America are also on the side of Israel. But I don't think we should really exaggerate the weakness of this coalition. we should take a look at some of the Arab members of this coalition. We know, for example, that the Egyptian President Mubarak is on record as saying that if Israel is hit, Israel has the right to retaliate. He believes in the Israeli doctrine of self-defense. We know that the Saudis could also look the other way. We even really could bet that the Jordanians will understand why the Israelis have to retaliate. I think that the one member of this coalition for whom this attack on Israel is a difficult one politically is really are the Syrians. But we never needed them. They were never really in this coalition in a full way. They were never really full partners in this enterprise. So I think Saddam Hussein has now played his big gamble. That is that this war involves Israel. But I think some of the other the Arab members of this coalition can take this challenge to the coalition.
Well, that'll be interesting to see and to watch as things develop. In this hour, 6 Scud missiles hit Israel. The Israelis are reportedly retaliating. You think, Fuad Ajami, that the Egyptians will remain in line. The Saudi Arabians obviously do so. Key here is the Syrians, and you're saying, in effect, listen, to hell with them. If they stay, fine. If they don't, fine.
We don't need them, and I think there is, however, on the level of the street, you know, everyone is always talking about the Arab street. On the level of the Arab masses, there may be some enthusiasm now for Saddam Hussein that he's finally delivered on his promise of targeting Israel. But the basic Arab members of the coalition will hold because they know what this war is about. They know it's not about Israel. They know it's about Saddam. And Saddam, in my judgment now, that he has aimed these missiles at Israel, is a far more vulnerable man. He really is finished, because I think now he has dramatized to the region that a man who not only has invaded and conquered Kuwait, but a man who's aiming missiles in every direction is a complete challenge to the order of that region.
But I want to underline that we do not know that any of these 6 Scuds known to have hit Israel tonight, we don't know whether they had chemical warheads or not, but in a message to Washington's allies today, President Bush said, and I quote, "We have warned Iraq to avoid the use of weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, and nuclear." It was a specific warning from President Bush. Now, one of the ways that this attack on Israel could change the equation, the Israelis now reportedly retaliating, that President Bush may indeed feel that he needs to increase the number and kinds of attacks that he's aiming at Iraq.
Absolutely, because in effect, now that we couldn't guarantee to the Israelis that we knocked Saddam out of contention, and we didn't knock his weapons of mass destruction all the way, I think we now have to increase the dose on Saddam. I mean, that's the logic of it. In order to protect this coalition, there will be some public opinion gain for Saddam in the Arab world. A marginal gain. Some people who will now feel that, look, the Israelis have always been invincible, they've been modern, they've been advanced and sophisticated, and the Arabs have never had an answer to Israel, that now maybe Saddam is the knight of Arabism and he really can deliver something for the more excitable members of and parts of the Arab world. But the fundamental members, the basic Arab members of the coalition, can hang in there.
And from Saddam Hussein's point of view, what he did was take the best shot the United States and its allies could deliver, and then their next shot, and yet a third shot, and then he fired apparently from these mobile missile launchers, these Scuds at Israel, aimed at the Israelis, but aimed primarily at trying to crack the coalition apart.
And aimed at changing this war from a military one, which he's sure to lose, to a political and ideological one, which he thinks he has a chance at winning. That's really what this strike is all about. To change a military confrontation at which he is an underdog into a political confrontation where he plays to the street and he plays to the masses in the Arab world. He embarrasses King Fahd. He embarrasses President Mubarak. That's his bet. That's the biggest chance he's got, because he can't win a military confrontation, but he thinks he has a chance at winning a political and ideological confrontation.
But you've been underscoring this point, that Nasser lost and became an even bigger and more important leader. Sadat lost, but became a bigger and even more important leader. And what you're suggesting here is there is a chance, this is Saddam's big gamble, that he could lose the military war but come out a bigger man on the Middle East campus.
Well, this is it. This is it for him. Because in effect, he's always said that this is really, I mean, his excuse was, this was never about Kuwait, that August wasn't really about Kuwait, that he really aimed to create a center of Arab power, that the problem is with the Arab world.
Excuse me, Fuad, for interrupting, but these are live pictures from Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, and there are reports of an explosion near where these photographs are coming to you from. Bob Simon, are you there in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia?
Dan, two things which are mutually contradictory have happened over the last couple of minutes. About 5 minutes ago, the air raid siren stopped sounding and we were given the all clear. Just about 30 seconds ago, we heard a loud explosion and were told again by Saudi officials that we are in imminent danger of an attack. That's all we know at this point. For the first time in some time, I hear aircraft flying over here again. It's been completely silent for at least the last 20 minutes.
Bob, we'll come back to you in just a second. Right now, our CBS News coverage of an air raid alert in Saudi Arabia continues.
You are watching CBS News continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Our continuous coverage of the changing Persian Gulf War resumes, and here are the working storylines of the hour. At least 6 Iraqi Scud missiles have hit Israel. There are some casualties. People in Israel don gas masks. The last report was that the Israelis were retaliating against the Iraqis. We go now to Bob Simon, back to him in Saudi Arabia. Air raid sirens sounded there, and there was a sound of an explosion. Bob, do we know any more about what's actually going on? Well, we just lost power to Bob Simon, and the hotel has cut the power again. Now, let's study ourselves a moment and try to bring you in some reasonable form a sense that things may be changing dramatically in the war, but again, it's the very early stages and hard to tell. We're going to go to Tom Fenton back in Israel. We're bouncing back and forth between Israel and Saudi Arabia. In Israel, we know there have been 6 Scud missiles hit. In Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, there was a report that Scud missiles had been fired in that direction, but we do not know, I repeat for emphasis, do not know whether any have hit. Bob Simon told us last time we had him up that in addition to the air raid sirens, he heard some explosions, and when we tried to go back to him, the power was cut. But let's try again, because the hotel cuts the power on and off. Bob Simon, are you there now?
Yes, Dan, the sirens just went off again, and we're being told again by Saudi officials that we are in imminent danger. We have no idea what that means. Over the last couple of minutes, warplanes have once again been taking off after a considerable lull, an unusual lull, but they just took to the skies. 2 planes took off a couple of minutes ago, Dan.
But no explanation of what the Saudi official meant when he told you were in imminent danger, quote unquote.
No, we don't. These things have a way of assuming a life of their own. There have been so many sirens over the last 24 hours, Dan, that we're beginning to treat some of them with a certain amount of skepticism. I hope we don't get burned when the real one comes.
Explosions, you said you thought you heard an explosion in the distance?
There was an explosion, but we can't identify it. It did not sound like incoming to me. It could have been a sonic boom. There was a lot of frenzy around here when it happened. Nobody has been able to identify it yet.
Well, for our viewers and listeners, Bob Simon, one of the most experienced combat correspondents in the world, when he says it didn't sound like incoming to him, the view around this newsroom at least would be you could pretty well bank that it wasn't. But we'll be monitoring the situation in Saudi Arabia. Bob Simon saying that while the air raid sirens sounded, he did hear something. It sounded like an explosion in the distance. He doesn't quite know what to make of what is obviously a nervous situation in and around Dhahran at the moment. Now, let's go back to Israel. Tom Fenton in Tel Aviv, where we do know a few things about what's happening there. 6 Scud missiles have hit in Israel. Tom, any other details?
Well, there have been 2 more explosions, Dan. Now, I'm not sure whether these are unexploded warheads being blown up or whether these are new hits. So I'll have to qualify that. Since we last talked about, there was another siren about 3 or 4 minutes ago, and that could have been the siren that preceded these 2 explosions. What is becoming apparent is that these things are getting through the radar nets, that we're not getting much advance warning, or they're being picked up at just the very last minute. One wonders about the satellites that are supposed to be flying over Iraq. One of the Israeli commentators I talked to the other day said it's like a bus lane up there. There's so many. Apparently, they're not being able to pick these things up. I guess they fly. I don't know whether they fly under the radar, but they're flying through the radar. That's quite clear. Now, to recap, we know that there have been casualties. We know there have been 6 hits. There may have been 2 more hits just a few minutes ago. Clearly, the attack is not over, and there's no way of telling when it's going to be over because you don't know how many more arrows he has in his bow. We'll just have to sit it out until until it's over, and this threat may continue for several days until all the missile sites are wiped out. I'm not surprised if the Israelis are retaliating, given the nature of this government. It's a very strong, hardline government. I guess I'd be surprised if they didn't retaliate. Dan?
Tom, did I understand you to say that while we have 6 confirmed Scud missile hits in Israel, that you believe there may have been 2 more?
There were 2 explosions heard once again in the Holon area. Somebody said they were east of Holon. That's sort of a working-class suburb south of Tel Aviv.
And that's
so there's 6 confirmed and possible 8.
And that Holon area is one of the places where there are reported some casualties. Now, Dateline Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, we know that an air raid drill has been underway there. It's a confusing situation. Let me show you some videotape, if we can get it up. Reporters say, this is it, that they've seen some bright explosions in the distance. Now, there are those bright explosions. They don't know if these are missiles or flares. Our Bob Simon, Scott Pelley, and other reporters on the scene say that everything's unclear right now. Now, this is another aircraft leaving the base as the unrelenting U.S. Air Armada's campaign against Iraq and Iraqi forces in Kuwait continues. Now, we're going to go back to Bob Simon in Dhahran. Bob, any further information as we hear the air raid sirens go off again?
Dan, I think you can hear the information behind me. These are municipal air raid sirens. They're also coming from the base. This is the first time we've heard these sirens. Until now, they've been coming strictly from the hotel. Dan, one of the very interesting questions about the possibility, the prospect, the probability of Israeli retaliation now is the knowledge that there are American planes in the sky as well. Now, how are the Israelis going to attack with when the Americans are there at the same time? There is no coordination between the 2 air forces. The Israelis have been seeking coordination from the very beginning. The Americans have refused to coordinate with the Israelis with the effort to keep them out altogether. The Israelis have also been very, very aware of the danger of what they've called a flying Liberty. Liberty was the American ship that was sitting in the Mediterranean in 1967, which the Israelis sank. The Israelis do not want to shoot down an American aircraft. They do not want to be shot down by an American aircraft. What is going on in the skies right now over western Iraq is a very, very problematic question, Dan.
From Bob Simon in Saudi Arabia, where it's still unclear exactly what is going on there. Air raid sirens, Bob said for the first time, a U.S. military air raid siren sounding around the Dhahran air base. But let's go to back to WCBS TV reporter and anchorman Jim Jensen in Jerusalem. Jim?
Dan, I just had a report that Haifa, to the north of Tel Aviv, has been put on alert. The air raid sirens have gone off in Haifa, and the people there have been told to put on their gas masks. We were told earlier today there were 3 possible targets for Iraqi missiles. Haifa, because it's a center for Israeli oil refining. Tel Aviv, because it's symbolic of Zionism. And the 3rd target would be Dimona, where Israel's nuclear reactor is located. So far, 1 target has been hit, Tel Aviv. Now Haifa's on alert.
Well, Jim,
other than that, I have no news to report.
Well, Jim,
other than to tell you that to put on a gas mask is a very strange, weird experience. I said to myself, is this what we've come to now? How civilized are we? But this is the way it is.
This is the way it is, and this is what it's come to, Jim. We can tell you that at least 2 Scud missiles have hit Haifa. As part of our live coverage, it's hard sometimes to know in one place what's been reported elsewhere, but at least 6 Scuds have hit Israel, 2 in Haifa, 1 in another area in the north of Israel, Sfak, then 3 in the Tel Aviv area. Thanks, Jim Jensen. We'll be coming back to you again soon. We want to go for context and comment now to retired U.S. Air Force General Michael Dugan, who recently commanded the U.S. Air Force. General Dugan, the Israelis reportedly are in the process of retaliating against the Iraqis. And Bob Simon raised an interesting point. So far as anyone has been able to determine, there's no coordinated command with the Israelis. When they get over their targets in Iraq, if we take it on face value that these reports the Israelis are retaliating, it's going to be very crowded and even more dangerous in the skies over the Iraq, isn't it?
Mike Wallace said that these were politically tipped missiles, but there's also some practical problems with the response that the Israelis might have. Indeed, we have, if one has about 2,000 sorties a day, one might have 200 sorties an hour running through Iraqi airspace.
General, I'm afraid we had some audio problems right at the beginning. Let's start from the beginning. With Israeli combat aircraft now or soon to be in Iraqi airspace, how much more complicated and dangerous does that make it?
There's potential conflict between the coalition forces, who are very well integrated, very well timed, and very well deconflicted in terms of space and time over targets, and the Israelis flying in what would look like a random pattern outside the bounds of the planning by the coalition.
General Dugan, two questions. One, how could Saddam Hussein, after the kind of air pounding he's been taking, get off these Scud missiles? And two, why didn't some U.S. Equipment spot them? And for that matter, why didn't the Israelis spot them and stop them?
I'm not sure I know what the scenario is, Dan, but these were apparently the mobile missiles. It would appear that the Iraqis ran them out in the middle of the night. They ran them out in a time frame where we do not have nearly as elaborate and nearly as refined reconnaissance screen to pick these things up. They probably put them in place or started to move them at 9 o'clock at night, got them in place around midnight, refueled them for an hour, hour and a half, and launched them in the time frame of 2 or 3 local time. Could we have done something? Hard to find mobile missiles. It's a problem we've looked at for years.
General, we're going to go back to Tom Fenton in Tel Aviv. Tom? Go ahead, Tom.
Protect yourself, how to put the mask on, how to give yourself a shot of atropine and all the other things you have to do in case of a gas attack. To recap what we know right now, we've been told to put our gas mask back on again. We heard another siren about 10 or 15 minutes ago. We heard 2 bangs to the east of Holon. We are not sure what it was. We do know that there have been 6 confirmed Scud hits. We know these from our own sources. So that's 6 and now possibly 8. We do know there have been some casualties. We're still not sure whether this was a chemical attack or a conventional attack. It could be a mixture of both.
We know that these missiles have very small payloads. To go as far as they go, to get the range that they have a reduced warhead. They're also very inaccurate. They can be as much as a mile off target. That doesn't mean you could aim at Tel Aviv and hit Jerusalem, but it does mean you could aim at the center of Tel Aviv and hit the suburbs. Dan?
I want to mention to our viewers and listeners that Tom Fenton was out of sync there for the moment because we had a little bit of satellite problems. It's true in journalism, as it sometimes is true in the weaponry and in combat, that highly sophisticated and technologically advanced equipment works most of the time, but it doesn't work all of the time. Israeli radio is now telling listeners in Tel Aviv and Haifa to put their gas masks back on. Clearly, the Israelis are doing their best to row with a dangerous situation. The 6 confirmed Scud hits, including those 3 around Tel Aviv and 2 around Haifa. Tom Fenton says that there are unconfirmed reports, but that he believes he heard 2 other explosions, believes there may be a total of 8 Scud hits in Israel. Now, the situation Thomas now about to put his gas mask back on. Apparently, Tom, you've heard the Israeli radio instructions telling you to put it back on.
That's right, Dan. I took it off too. Oh, we've lost the...
Well, we just lost the picture to you, Tom.
Okay.
Tom, I think the most important thing here is that we want to underscore that while we believe that Israeli aircraft are in the process of retaliating, we believe that because the Israeli radio has reported it, and David Martin at the Pentagon says that the indications at the Pentagon are that the Israelis are indeed in the process of retaliating against Iraq. General Dugan, we talked about the unreliability of these Scud missiles and the fact that they aren't very accurate, but in the end, Saddam Hussein has been able to do what he promised, he threatened he would do, that is lob at least 6 of them and possibly 8 into Israel.
The Scud missiles' reliability is a problem. Its accuracy is what its major problem is. And in general, one looks at accuracy in terms of 1 or 2% of error per mile. And they're firing at approximately 400 miles, so one gets an error of 4 to 8 miles. When you shoot at a city, Tel Aviv, a big city, you can get a hit within a 4 to 8 mile area, and that's why we call it a terrorist weapon, not a military weapon.
Michael Dugan. The story is changing rapidly about the war. These are the storylines of the hour. Israel reported striking back now, retaliating at Iraq after a missile raid. These are photographs from Tel Aviv just in. These pictures of Tel Aviv just in. Let's listen for a moment as we watch. The air raid sirens just ending. Tel Aviv streets. Let's listen for a second, see if we can hear any of the explosions. And I don't know what that last picture is, and I don't want to speculate about it. Well, we simply are not going to speculate as to what that is. Apparently, it's people taking shelter. Yes, and putting on chemical. Let's watch this for a second. It's a mother trying to protect her children. There's so much happening so quickly around. You can't report this and just not observe that here we are in the last tenth of the 20th century, and we're talking about a possible chemical weapon attack against women and children. Underscore the word possible chemical weapon attack. These pictures, raw and unedited, coming from Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv has been hit by three, Tel Aviv and its surrounding area, but hit by 3 Scud missiles. Haifa hit by 2. 1 other Scud is known to have hit Israel for a total of 6 so far. Here's the protection they're trying to put around this child in Tel Aviv, and the mother trying to strap on a gas mask. We wanted to just put that up and let it play for a moment. That's the reality in Israel tonight. One doesn't want to overstate it, but it's no good kidding ourselves, no good understating it. The dimensions of the war have changed over the last hour. Saddam Hussein making good on his threat to hurl the Scuds at Israel, hitting with at least 6, possibly as many as 8. Tom Fenton believes, but does not know that at least some of those Scuds did have chemical weapons. He believes that partly because of what the instructions have been from the Israeli government. We're going to pause for a moment to continue with our headlines after those sobering pictures from Israel, where mothers having to strap on gas masks to their children and put special paraphernalia around the cribs of children. One could say rather directly that it puts in perspective the Israelis' response, which is to immediately say, we are going to retaliate against Iraq. Explosions heard in Saudi Arabia, what they were and why they were unclear at the moment. Air raid sirens sounding around the Dhahran military base. We're trying to sort that out and find out what the facts are. Allied bombings continue inside Iraq and in Kuwait, on Iraqi forces in Kuwait, including B-52 strikes. U.S. officials report that Israel is now apparently retaliating. U.S. forces saying that. Israeli jets heading for targets in Iraq. Possible complications over Iraq, and so far as we know, the Iraqis don't have any coordinated command with the U.S. and allied warplanes over Iraq. Iraq a short time ago fired Scud missiles into Israel, striking at least 6 targets, including 3 in Tel Aviv, 2 in Haifa. Casualties have been reported, ambulances taking people to hospitals, at least from the suburb to the south of Tel Aviv, Holon. It is not clear yet if the Scud missiles had chemical warheads. We're trying to determine whether they did or didn't. As of this moment, we don't know. Air raid sirens went off and citizens were told to put on gas masks and head for sealed rooms. That was in Israel. Then in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, our correspondent Bob Simon says that officials there report that Dhahran is, quote, in, quote, imminent danger. These pictures live as the U.S. and allied warplanes continue taking off. I want to correct myself. I'm told now this is videotape. These aircraft thundering into the night as they thundered away in the day. Now these are pictures on videotape of people heading for the air raid shelters as the Dhahran area was told it was, quote, in imminent danger. There were unconfirmed reports. Only one source, Saudi officials, said that some Scud missiles had been fired in the direction of Dhahran. Now that was the last we heard, and I emphasize that that report was never confirmed. Bob Simon has also heard explosions in and around Dhahran. We saw earlier some pictures of some mysterious fire in the sky. It's an unclear, confusing picture in and around Dhahran. Nobody knows, and I want to underline this, nobody knows if Dhahran area has been attacked by Scuds. We are going to work right now this way. We don't know it, so we aren't going to report it. We do know that there's a confusing, tense situation around Dhahran. That's really all we know. Air raid sirens have gone off there, and Scud missiles were reported headed for Dhahran, but this according to Saudi officials. But in the early stages of the war, 24-plus hours ago, there were all kinds of reports of Scud missiles on the way. Most of them proved to be untrue, although the report from the Bahrain officials last evening that some Scud missiles had been fired in that direction but didn't quite get there, that report pretty well checked out. The Allied air offensive continues, relentless air raids against targets inside Iraq and Kuwait, now including B-52 strikes on the elite Iraqi Guard, the in effect Praetorian Guard, of which Saddam Hussein has said it's his very best. Now, some of that elite guard is inside Kuwait itself, but a great deal of it had been pulled out of Kuwait and sort of held in the southern part of Iraq. The B-52s made an effort today and tonight to pound, in effect, the daylights out of them. David Martin is at the Pentagon. David?
Dan, Defense Department officials say there is no indication, repeat, no indication that Scud missiles have been launched in the direction of Saudi Arabia. So whatever is happening in Dhahran, the air raid sirens, the strange explosions, the strange lights in the sky, apparently are not related to an actual Scud missile attack. There may have been a false alarm, but right now there is no indication of a Scud missile attack against targets in Saudi Arabia. It appears now that 7 or 8 Scud missiles have landed in Israel. Still no confirmation on whether those are armed with conventional warheads or chemical warheads. Dan, you were asking a little while ago about how these missiles could get through and surprise us. I believe the way this is working is that we have satellites up there that can detect the heat put off by a rocket plume when the missile launches. And those satellites have been counting these launches, literally just counting them as they lift off from Iraq, but seeing them and doing something about it are two different things. You need a missile that can shoot down that incoming Scud missile. The U.S. has such missiles in Saudi Arabia. They're called Patriot missiles. Israel does not have such missiles. The U.S. has just sent some Patriot missiles to Israel, but they are not yet operational. So I believe the situation is that U.S. intelligence is able to warn Israel that the missiles are coming, but Israel's not able to do anything about it except hunker down and take the hit.
David Martin confirming what Tom Fenton said earlier. It's now confirmed that more than 6 Scud missiles have hit Israel. It's believed that 7, possibly 8. The war in the Gulf is changing. Our coverage continues. Dan Rather, along with Mike Wallace and retired U.S. Air Force General Michael Dugan in New York. As events unfold in and around the Persian Gulf area, air raid sirens sounding around the Dhahran base in Saudi Arabia. But David Martin at the Defense Department says that so far as the U.S. Defense Department can determine, no Scud missiles have been fired in the direction of Dhahran. Much of the nervousness, much of the concern around Dhahran, no doubt fueled by the fact, and it is a fact, that Saddam Hussein has succeeded in hitting Israel with Scud missiles. Now he's hit them with at least 7, possibly as many as 8 Scud missiles, 3 in and around Tel Aviv, 2 around Haifa. There have been some casualties. The extent of casualties in Israel, we do not yet know. We also don't know whether or not these Scud missiles that hit Israel were tipped with chemical weapons, any of them. Tom Fenton has said for about the last hour and a half that he believed, he did not know, He believed that at least one of the Scuds must have had a chemical weapon tip, but he did not know that. Let's go back for a moment and look at pictures of Israelis on the alert when Israeli radio said that the Scuds were hitting and possible chemical attack. These were some of the scenes. Israel is in the process now of retaliating against the Iraqis. Tom Fenton reported that, as did Jim Jensen earlier. David Martin has confirmed it. Our coverage of the war around the Persian Gulf rolls on. Some of our stations perhaps wanted to break away at that point. Let's pause now and try to give some context and perspective. See the war theater as a whole. The air armada led by the United States continues to pound Iraq and Iraqi forces in Kuwait, including big B-52 raids. And the B-52s are now striking from at least one other base in addition to the Diego Garcia base. That's that island in the Indian Ocean where we knew B-52s are based. Now they're striking from yet another location. That whole air war continuing. Ground troops maneuvering closer and closer to the Kuwaiti border amid indications that the ground offensive may be the offensive, really a counteroffensive against Saddam Hussein to free Kuwait might be launched sooner as opposed to later. All of that happening as part of the background as Saddam Hussein hits Israel with the Scud missiles. Let's go now to Bill Plant of the State Department. Bill?
Well, Dan, we've gotten some word here that the belief is that most of those missiles were probably conventionally armed, that they were not topped with any kind of chemical weapons. But nobody is quite certain about some of the others, which matches the information you've been getting. The United States is not likely to protest Israel's retaliatory mission. It will say that Israel has the right to defend itself and that it is inclined to do so and that it is understandable that it will do so. But it's also true, Dan, that last week the United States asked Israel not to react if it was hit, to let the U.S. do it, and the Israelis turned the Deputy Secretary of State, Larry Eagleburger, down. So as they proceed, it's no surprise here, but it does complicate the equation considerably. This is what everybody feared.
Bill Plant of the State Department. Mike Wallace, you were saying that ringing in our ears.
9 o'clock this morning.
Right. The words of the Defense Secretary saying, let's try to keep this euphoria under control.
Both Cheney and Colin Powell this morning said, look, it's going very, very well, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Saddam Hussein apparently has been laying in the weeds just a little bit. Question to General Dugan. How long, I believe that the Israeli Air Force Chief of Staff said earlier this week that it takes a half hour to get to western Iraq from Israel, an hour to get to Baghdad, but is that over Jordan, or how long would it take if Israeli planes go through Saudi Arabia?
It would take considerably longer.
On the order of what, 4 or 5 hours?
No, it would probably take another hour. But that amounts to fuel, that amounts to additional operational difficulties.
So if they came over Jordan, chances are they're hitting now, if they're going after western Iraq. How do you go after a mobile missile?
Mobile missiles are a very difficult problem, and we've talked about in our country strategic relocatable targets for some time. This is a tactical relocatable target. They're very difficult to find, and then they're difficult to pin down once you've found them. So if you see one in some kind of a reconnaissance arrangement, it's difficult to know that it would be there a half hour or an hour later by the time your reconnaissance strike cycle was effective.
General Dugan, Mike Wallace, we're going to take a brief pause here. Those of you watching and listening, our CBS News coverage of the Gulf War will continue with the very latest on the Scud missiles, 7, possibly 8, that have hit Israel, and the Israelis in the process of retaliating against the Iraqis. All the while, the U.S.-led air war over Iraq and Kuwait continues.
This is CBS.
Some people think lupus strikes only young women in the childbearing years. They're wrong. Lupus can strike men, children, even the elderly. In fact, lupus can strike someone you know and love. There is no known cause or cure, but there is treatment to control it. To help or be helped, contact the Lupus Foundation of America at 1-800-558-0121 or the chapter nearest you.
Athletes with mental retardation don't compete for money, or fame, or endorsements. Experience the 1991 International Special Olympics Games, Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're winning over the world.
You are watching CBS News continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
New complications in the war, new developments unfolding. Let's go to Tel Aviv and Tom Fenton to get the latest on the Iraqi Scud missile attack against Israel. Tom?
Dan, I've got two new reports as the Bureau people here continue to work the telephones. One is that at the Tel Beirut Junction, that's a major road junction about 5 miles north of Tel Aviv, very close to where I used to live, incidentally. The area is roped off on the suspicion that nerve gas was used there, that once again, just the suspicion that there's nerve gas in the warhead. A second report that it had Tikva, that's an area not far from here, a Yemenite to the south, a Yemenite picturesque neighborhood. We have an eyewitness report from there of buildings burning, buildings destroyed, and people running in panic and no sign of the rescue services. That would sound like that was a conventional warhead. Now that raises the possibility, since we have